class, in this video we're going over Unit 1, which is on anatomical terms, directional terms, and a little bit of an overview of biology and chemistry concepts that will help you throughout A&P, okay? All right, so first, what is anatomy, what is physiology? Anatomy is just the study of structures, okay? So this is what lab is going to be mainly based on, right? What are, for this unit, like what are the different directional terms, the different anatomical regions, etc. For the different organs and structures in the body, where are they found, what are their names, things like that. Physiology is the study of how things function, okay? So how in A&P1 you'll learn about different, or how the muscle contracts, right? How bones grow, etc. Okay, so the actual functions of things, how things actually work in a body. Okay, levels of organization. So we start with the chemical level. So first we have atoms. These would be our elements like carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, etc. Okay, those can be put together to make molecules. Okay, so for example, if you have two hydrogen and an oxygen, you would make water, H2O, right? Lots of different things come together to make DNA, right? That's also another molecule. Okay, those molecules can come together to make cells. Okay, so a cell is the smallest unit of life. Okay, so you can have a living thing that's only one cell. Humans are many, many cells, right? So not humans, but certain things can just be one cell. So smallest unit of life. Those come together to make different tissues. Okay, or tissues. So we have epithelial tissues, connective tissues throughout the body, muscle tissues, and nervous tissue. Okay, and we'll learn about that in Unit 2 in a lot of detail. Okay, tissues come together to make organs. Okay, so like the liver, like the stomach, like the heart, like the lungs, etc. Okay, so those are all made up of different types of tissues, like endothelial tissues, connective tissues, muscle tissues. You'll have nervous tissue as well, all those tissues working together to make up an organ. Now, different organs are going to work together in organ systems. Okay, so this would be like the digestive system, right? You have lots of different organs working together to help us break down food and absorb nutrients. Okay, the urinary system, helping us to filter blood and get rid of waste. The cardiovascular system, helping us to pump blood and oxygen throughout the body and take out metabolic waste and carbon dioxide. Okay, and then if you put different organ systems together, you would get an organism. Okay, so an organism would be like a cat, like a dog, like a human. Okay, and in this course we focus on human anatomy and physiology. Okay, so we're going to focus on a human, okay, and how the human body works. We have 11 organ systems in the body, okay, and we're going to learn about all of them throughout A&P1 and A&P2. So let's go through the ones that we're going to learn about in A&P1, and we'll go over the ones in A&P2 as well. This is just a general overview. You'll get a lot more detail on all of these organs throughout this semester and next semester. Okay, so our first system that we're going to talk about, we're going to get into tissues in Unit 2. Unit 1 is just kind of an overview of things that you should know. But in Unit 3, we're going to start talking about the integumentary system. Okay, so this includes skin, hair, and nails, and their associated structures like oil and sweat glands in the skin. Okay, so lots of different functions of the integumentary system. A major one would be protection, right? Protection of the inside of the body and the rest of the organs of the body. Also, temperature regulation. Skin helps us to make vitamin D, helps us to eliminate waste through sweat, and detects sensory information from the outside world, and helps to store fat and helps to insulate the body. Okay, next we have the skeletal system. Okay, so skeletal is of course bones, but also their joints and their associated cartilages. Okay, skeletal system mainly for movement and support of the body. It also helps to protect our internal organs, like the skull helps protect our brain, right? Or the sternum helps protect our heart. Okay. Blood cells are produced in the red bone marrow of bones. And there's some mineral and lipid storage as well, like calcium is stored in bones, for example. Okay. Next we have the muscular system or muscle system. So this would be our 3 different types of muscle that we have. So skeletal muscle, cardiac muscle, and smooth muscle. Okay, and muscular system is for, all 3 of those are for movement. Okay, but also skeletal muscle helps us to maintain our posture and produce heat. Okay, but mainly muscular system is for movement, right? Muscle pulls on bones to move, and smooth muscle helps to move organs, and cardiac muscle helps to pump the heart. Okay, and the final system we're going to learn about in A&P1 is the nervous system. Nervous. So this would be the brain, spinal cord, nerves, and the special sense organs. Okay, so nervous system function is to generate nerve impulses to send information quickly throughout the body. Helps to regulate activities, detect changes in and out of the body, interpret them, and then send out signals to muscles and organs based on that information. Okay, and then the rest of the 11 organ systems we learn about in A&P2, starting with endocrine. Okay, endocrine system are the glands and cells that produce hormones in the body. So that includes hypothalamus, pituitary gland, and pineal gland in the brain, and also the thymus, thyroid, parathyroid, adrenal glands, pancreas, and ovaries and testes. Okay, so the endocrine system helps the body to maintain homeostasis by releasing hormones. So a bit slower than the nervous system, but they both kind of work together to help the body to maintain homeostasis. Okay, then we have the cardiovascular. Now this includes a lot of things, right? The heart, of course, blood, and blood vessels. Okay, and of course its function is to pump blood through the body to bring oxygen to tissues and take carbon dioxide waste away to be breathed out. Okay, blood helps us to defend against disease because it contains white blood cells. And within the blood plasma, we have clotting mechanisms that help to repair damaged blood vessels so that we don't bleed out. Okay, then we have our lymphatic and immune system. We put this into one because they're very closely linked to each other. They work very closely together with each other to help filter and clean the blood of anything foreign that may come into contact with. Okay. Also, B and T cells are going to mature in the lymphatic and immune system. Okay, so this includes lymphatic vessels, lymphatic fluid, the thymus, the spleen, lymph nodes, tonsils, and immune cells. So that would be, again, our B and T cells. Okay. Then we have respiratory system. Now let's write the rest of them down. Respiratory, digestive, urinary, reproductive. Okay, respiratory system, this would be our lungs, of course, but also leading into the lungs, the bronchial tubes, the trachea, the pharynx, and the voice box or the larynx. Okay, so respiratory system takes oxygen in from the outside and exchanges it with the cardiovascular system and helps to release that carbon dioxide as waste. Okay, and then the larynx have vocal cords to produce sound, right, so that we can speak and communicate. Digestive system includes the GI tract, which is everywhere that food passes through, including the mouth, pharynx, esophagus, stomach, intestines, and anus. And it also includes accessory organs. So these are organs that secrete enzymes that help break food down, but food does not pass through them. Okay, so this would be the salivary glands, liver, gallbladder, and pancreas. Okay. So digestive system function is both mechanical and chemical breakdown of food, absorption of nutrients, and elimination of solid waste. Urinary system, this includes the kidneys, ureters, which lead from the kidneys to the bladder, and the urethra. So the urinary system filters through the blood to produce waste in the form of urine. Okay, and then the bladder would store that waste until it can be released. And then finally, the reproductive system, so the gonads, which would be testes or ovaries, and their accessory organs, so the fallopian tubes, uterus, vagina, and mammary glands, or the epididymis, vas deferens, seminal vesicles, prostate, and penis. So function of the reproductive system is the gonad's function is to produce gametes, so sperm or egg cells. And those can unite to form a zygote, which can grow into a fetus, okay, which can grow into a baby. And then mammary glands are part of the reproductive system, and those produce milk for babies. Okay. All right, now let's talk about homeostasis. So homeostasis is maintaining an equilibrium or balance within the body. Okay. So the body has lots of regulatory processes to help maintain homeostasis, and every one of these 11 systems that we just discussed help our body to maintain homeostasis. Okay, so major examples would be the nervous and endocrine systems, but of course we need all of these systems in order to maintain balance in our body. Okay, so an example would be if we have a temperature, right? If we have a 100-degree temperature, 101-degree temperature, we're probably fine, right? Maybe we won't even take Tylenol to bring it down. We'll just deal with it. It helps our body to fight things off, right? But if we have a 106-degree temperature, 104-degree temperature, that can be dangerous, especially over a prolonged period of time, right? So then we'd want to get help for that. Now, if we maintain that very high temperature for too long, it can cause our organs to shut down and even lead to death. So it's very important that our body has these mechanisms to help us to maintain balance and homeostasis within the body. Okay. We have two different types of feedback systems in the body, and these feedback systems help us to maintain homeostasis. So first we have negative feedback. This is the most common feedback system, okay, by far. So this is a feedback system that helps to stabilize and maintain homeostasis by using feedback to reduce producing too much of something. Okay, so in the endocrine system, most of our hormones are going to work off of negative feedback systems. Okay, and this kind of works like the temperature in our home, right? So you set your thermostat to, let's say, 70 degrees. Okay, right now it's cold out, so when we heat our home, okay, it's going to turn on the heat when it's below 70 degrees, right? But once our house reaches 70 degrees, that heat is going to turn off, right? Eventually it's going to get cold again if it's cold outside, right? So once it starts to go below 70, let's say it reaches 68, 69 degrees, Now the heat's going to turn back on, okay? And it's going to maintain that delicate balance in keeping our home at 70 degrees. This is how the body works as well when releasing hormones or maintaining levels of ions in the body, etc. Okay? Positive feedback. This is where the initial stimulus or thing that was produced is amplified or keeps being produced more and more. Okay? And then you move away from some starting point. Okay? So in life, an example of this is like a microphone feedback increasing, right? So when you have that feedback and you hear that loud screech in the microphone, then that feedback causes it to be louder and louder, right, until it eventually stops. In the body, a famous example of positive feedback would be during childbirth and oxytocin production. So when the baby starts pushing down on the cervix, it causes the cervix to stretch, and this causes oxytocin to be released from the pituitary gland, the posterior pituitary. Okay? When the oxytocin is released, it causes the uterus to contract, and those are the contractions that a person feels when they're in labor. And the oxytocin goes back and tells the brain to secrete more oxytocin and more, etc., until after childbirth occurs. Okay, so it causes those contractions to become more intense and closer together because of the rapid increase of oxytocin. Okay. All right, so let's talk about the anatomical position. So this is just a standard way of visualizing the body to just keep everything standard. If on an exam I give you a question, you can assume I'm talking about the body in anatomical position unless I state otherwise. Okay, and in general, you can assume that of anything like medical or about the body that you read, okay, typically. So the anatomical position is standing with your feet facing forward, directly looking at the subject would be directly looking at you, right? And palms facing anteriorly, so palms facing outward, okay, at the sides, like this, okay? And this is, again, just to keep everything the same or standardized, because if I'm talking about the bones, for example, so we have two bones in the lower arm, the radius and ulna, okay? Now, if I turn my palms posteriorly, so I turn my hand over like this, now the radius crosses over the ulna and they're on opposite sides from where they are here, okay? So just to keep everything standardized, you should know what the anatomical position is, okay? We also have directional terms. So these are used to locate parts of the body related to each other, okay, in relation to each other. So always keep in mind anatomical left and right, okay? So whenever, if you're taking a lab practical, for example, or you're looking at a patient, right? If you're working in patient care, their left is going to be your right if you're facing them, right? So this here is my left, this here is my right. So make sure you always keep that in mind. Okay, when you're doing dissections, if I say, the stomach is on the left side, it's going to be the animal's left side, right? Okay, so always keep that in mind. And on practicals and things, if you have to write left or right, make sure you know which one it is, right? And we're going to be going through the body regions, and you'll need to know the anatomical left and right for that, okay? So directional terms, ipsilateral and contralateral. Okay. Ipsilateral means on the same side of the body, okay? So something that's on the same side. So I can say my gallbladder and my appendix, they're both toward the right side, so they would both be ipsilateral. Contralateral would be on the opposite side of the body. So I could say my appendix and my stomach are contralateral because the appendix is on the right side and the stomach is on the left side of the body, okay? Okay, we have 4 other terms that are kind of similar to each other but differ based on if you're talking about a human or a 4-legged animal, okay? So let's go through those. So anterior and ventral, and then posterior and dorsal. All right, so in humans, anterior and ventral mean the same thing. It's the front side of something, okay? In 4-legged animals, though, Anterior means the front, ventral means the belly side. Okay, so in a four-legged animal, let's say a cat, the anterior would be their head, neck, chest, and front paws. Their ventral side would be their underside, where their belly is. Okay, same thing in humans, posterior and dorsal both mean the entire back side of a person. But in a four-legged animal, posterior for the cat would be the tail and hind legs. But dorsal would be the back of something. So on the cat, the back is on the top, right? Because it's a four-legged animal. Okay, so make sure you know the difference of these four terms when we're talking about a human or a four-legged animal. Okay, superficial and deep. Superficial is like toward the outside of something. So I can say, you know, my skin is superficial to my heart, right? And deep is more inward. Okay, so I can say my heart is deep to my sternum, right? The sternum is more superficial. It's more toward the outside of the body. It doesn't necessarily have to be on the outside of the body. We're just talking about more superficial or more toward the surface of the body compared to deep, which is more toward the inside of the body. Okay, proximal and distal. Proximal, like in proximity to, right? Close to something. Proximal means closer to the attached end. Okay, so my shoulder is proximal to my fingers, right? It's closer to my trunk of the body. Okay, distal, like distant is further away. So my fingers are distal to my shoulder and it's further away from the attached end. So that would be like the shoulder area would be the attached end here. And then the groin area is where the legs attach to the trunk. Okay. Superior and inferior. Superior is above, right? If you think you're superior, you think you're above like somebody else, right? So superior is above something. Okay, so my brain is superior to my heart, right? It's more above, right? Inferior is below. So if you feel like you're inferior, you feel like you're below, right? So my heart is inferior to my brain. Okay, it's below. Lateral and medial. So lateral, like lateral means like to the side, right? So lateral would be more to the side. So I can say my arm is lateral to my sternum. Okay. Lateral and medial. Medial, this would be like the medial part of my body, right down the center. Okay, so I can say my sternum is medial to my arm, right? It's more toward the center. It doesn't need to be exactly in the center, right? It just needs to be more toward the center. Okay. All right, so those are all the important directional terms. Anatomical terms I go through in a different video, so you can watch that video where I go through all of the anatomical terms you need to know. Okay. Okay. Planes. So planes are these imaginary flat surfaces that divide the body in different ways. Okay. And we have different types of, four major different types of planes. Okay. First, let's talk about sagittal. So a sagittal plane or sagittal cut is dividing the body into left and right parts. Okay, so that's just a general term. We have two specific types of sagittal cuts. A mid-sagittal cut or mid-sagittal plane would be in the middle, right? So cutting the body into equal left and right parts, so right down the middle. Parasagittal cut would be still cutting into left and right parts, but non-equally, right? So if you amputated my arm right here, for example, at the shoulder, you're still cutting it into a left part and a right part, but most of my body is going to be on this side, right? So a parasagittal cut is off center, okay? Transverse plane is cutting the body into superior and inferior parts, okay? So transverse plane would be like how a magician cuts their assistant, right? Down the center. It doesn't have to be in the center either, right? If my feet were cut off at the ankles, that would also be a transverse cut. Or my lower leg was cut off at the knee, still a transverse cut, okay? So just into superior and inferior parts, okay? Then we have the frontal or coronal plane. Either way, those terms are interchangeable. That's cutting into anterior and posterior parts. Okay, so cutting down this way. So I have an anterior side and a posterior side. Okay, and then the final one is like a catch-all term for everything else, and that's an oblique plane or oblique cut. And oblique, anytime you hear this word, you're going to hear it again when we talk about muscles. Okay, Oblique means anything diagonal. So any other cut that doesn't fit into those first three types would be an oblique cut. Okay, so if I were to cut kind of like diagonally anywhere on the body. Okay. All right, our body has a lot of cavities, which are spaces that hold, typically that hold organs, okay? And we have a few different ones that we're going to discuss, okay? So let's start with the cranial and vertebral cavity. So the cranial cavity is just this part of the skull here that holds the brain, okay? The cranium you can think of as the brain, okay? So cranial cavity. Dorsal cavity is the openings within the vertebrae that hold the spinal cord, okay, vertebral cavity. And these are both on the dorsal or back side of the body. So together, the cranial and vertebral cavity are known as the dorsal cavities, okay, dorsal cavities. Okay, next we have the thoracic cavity. Thoracic is the chest area, okay, so starting from right below the neck to the diaphragm is the thoracic cavity. So that houses mainly the lungs and heart, okay? And a couple other things as well, mainly the lungs and heart. Okay, pleural cavity. This is the space between the layers of the pleura that surround the lung. So most organs in the body have this double-layered serous membrane. The one that surrounds the lungs specifically is known as the pleura, and it has two layers. Okay, a visceral layer, which is directly connected to the lungs, and a parietal layer, which surrounds that one. And in between them, there's serous fluid, in this case it would be pleural fluid, that reduces friction and pain when the lungs expand and decrease, Okay, so the pleural cavity would be that space between the visceral and parietal layers of the pleura covering. Okay, then we have the pericardial cavity, which is similar to that pleural cavity, but it's the space between the layers that surround the heart. So the heart also would have a visceral and parietal connective tissue layer around it, that serous membrane known as the pericardium. So the pericardial cavity would be the space between those two layers surrounding the heart. And then the mediastinum. Mediastinum is the space between the lungs where the heart sits. Okay, so it'd be from about up here to right below the heart. Okay, and there's a picture of it in the PowerPoint that you can look at, but make sure you know the difference between the pericardial cavity and the mediastinum. Okay, then we have the abdominal cavity. So remember that diaphragm that separates the thoracic cavity from the abdominal cavity. Okay, so the abdominal cavity would hold a lot of the digestive organs. Okay, and then the pelvic cavity, this contains the bladder, parts of the large intestine, and the reproductive organs. Okay, together, you can put those two together because there's nothing that separates them. So you could put the abdominal and the pelvic cavity together in the abdominopelvic cavity. Okay, so we could talk about one or the other, or we could talk about them together. And those three together, the thoracic, abdominal, and pelvic cavity, make up the ventral cavity, right? Because on the belly side of the body. Okay, so those three together would be known as the ventral cavity. Okay, now let's get into the abdominal pelvic quadrants and regions. So let's go through, let's draw this one out because this always gets a little confusing. Okay, so now remember we're talking about, for these, anatomical left versus anatomical right. So it's going to be kind of opposite of what you're used to, right? So right is going to be on this side, left is going to be on this side. Okay, so let's go through the quadrants first. Quad means four. So this divides the abdominal cavity into four quadrants. Okay, so abdominal quadrants. And then we have the abdominal pelvic regions. That one is going to be 9 different regions. Abdominal pelvic regions. Okay, the quadrants are very straightforward. It divides the abdominal into these 4 areas, okay? We have the right upper quadrant, right lower quadrant, left upper quadrant, and left lower quadrant. That's it. Okay, they're just named off of where they are. Right and left, upper or lower. Okay, so those ones are very straightforward and easy, okay? No one ever gets those ones wrong. The abdominal pelvic regions are divided into 9 different regions. Okay, so like this. And again, remember this is the right, this is the left, this is the, of course, the center. Okay, so let's go through the center ones first. Okay, this top one is the epigastric. So this one's right in front of the stomach. Gastro, anytime you hear gastro, it has to do with the stomach or digestive system, but more specifically the stomach. So epigastric would be right in front of the stomach. The middle one here would be the umbilical region. Umbilical, because this would be where the umbilical cord is. So epigastric is in the center here. Umbilical would be where the belly button or umbilical cord once was. And then hypogastric you'd have a lot of intestines here. The bladder would be in this area as well, so it's below the umbilical. Hypo is like underneath the gastric area, underneath the digestive area, okay, or at the very bottom, okay? On the top left and right, we have the right and left hypochondriac region. Hypochondriac. Okay. Hypo again means underneath. Chondro, we're going to learn about this in the next unit when we get into tissues, but chondrocytes are cells that secrete the stuff that makes up cartilage. And cartilage connects our ribs to our sternum. So this is underneath the cartilage region. Okay, so it's the areas right underneath the ribs. Okay. Now the middle ones are the lumbar, because this is going to be like in the lower back area. The lumbar is between the bottom ribs and the pelvis. Okay, so this would be the right lumbar or left lumbar region. Okay, right and left lumbar. So I remember lumbar is like lower back, like if you have lumbar pain or like a lumbar support chair, it helps to give support to that lower back. Okay, and then the lowest ones are going to be the inguinal. So right inguinal and left inguinal regions. Okay, and inguinal is like in the groin area. So the groin area is where the legs meet with the trunk. So it's right above that area. Okay, at the very, very bottom of the pelvic area. Okay, right and left inguinal region.